Hello lovely people, my name's Stephen Kolber. I'm a teacher of English and English language in Melbourne. So what we're going to be talking about again is memorisation techniques. So as I always like to say, we ask our students to memorise a lot of things, but very rarely do we give them really effective and cutting edge strategies of how to do that. We focus too much on the written word, but what we know about the brain is that it's very visual, and it is much better at recalling things that have actually physically occurred, to your body, and things that you've actually acted out, things that you've actually mapped onto something. So rather than rewriting things 100 times, today we're going to be teaching with our hands. So very simple, the famous expression, I know that like I know the back of my hand. Well, today is the time when we teach our students something as well as they know the back of their hand, which for most people isn't that good, but anyway. So basically we're going to start with a list of concepts. You want it to be a long list, nothing too short, nothing too easy. If it can become a short little English word or an acronym, that's probably not necessary for this. But of course you're probably limited to around about 10 to 15 things for obvious reasons if you think about your hands. There's what we call the knuckle method, which is obviously mapping things to your knuckle, and mapping being the right word here because we want to make it visual in our brain that these knuckles each represent something. Most of these techniques we're taking from medical students, and obviously the knuckle method is good if you're learning bones and those sort of things. But what we're going to do is, of course, step one, get your list of concepts, have a really clear definition. Obviously the better your students understand the actual thing that they're trying to map to their hands, the better. So have a really clear definition, have each of the students have at least one, maybe two really quick definitions they can give for each of the concepts, so it's actually, they're not just memorising something they haven't learned properly yet. Second thing you're going to do as a teacher is you're going to go into the Auslan sign bank. There's a one-handed and the obvious two-handed alphabet, and there's also a series of signs that it's worth looking up for each of the concepts. They might not exist, in which case you might want to do, basically spell it out. One-handed, that's a particular sign, for example. Save yourself the time. If it's already out there, obviously you're going to be using that. But if it's not, you're going to be doing, there's a whole bunch of different hand shapes and sign language starting points that you might want to use. But you're trying to be mapping each of the concepts that you've plotted out onto students' hands. So keeping in mind, it could be gestural, it could be based on fingers. If there's 10 items, run them in order. Again, this probably works best for chronological things. And of course you want your students to be able to actually retrieve this. So once you've mapped it to the hands, you probably want to make sure that your students can replicate these motions themselves. And then of course the final step is giving them time to actually practice it out. And keeping in mind, in an exam, students will have their hands. So very simple technique. List your objects, list your concept, list your things. Have your students map it to their fingers, their hands, and do the same thing for them. They can even, using a texter, you might like to get them to write the concepts on the actual places of their hand that they're going to remember. And obviously by the time that the idea is that the ink has washed out, they can actually recall it without the sort of support of the texter or the pen that they've written on their hands. So just a quick, easy strategy to make things a little bit more visible, a little bit more physical for your students, and to get them to memorise concepts a little bit more effectively.